Welcome everybody here this morning to our continuing education webinar. We're so glad you've joined us to learn about digital accessibility. This webinar is for both Extension professionals and Extension Master Gardener volunteers. A couple of reminders before we jump in. Please keep your microphones on mute throughout the webinar. We'll have some time for questions at the end. If questions come up as we're moving through, please drop them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on those, and we'll read them out and give Bethany plenty of time to answer questions as we first let her go through the material and then address your questions. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Bethany Geiger, who is the Web Resource Specialist for NC State Extension Information Technology, or EIT, as we like to refer to them. Bethany manages the NC State Extension publication database. So anytime you've looked at the Extension Gardener Handbook or any of our wonderful publications on all of our topics Extension covers, Bethany's had a hand in making those available and making sure they're digitally accessible. So we really appreciate the work she does. That includes transferring content, formatting, and reviewing for quality assurance and accessibility. We're so happy you've joined us today, Bethany, to share with us what we need to be doing to make sure our content is digitally accessible for audiences, all of our audience who join us online.
All right. Okay, thanks so much for that introduction, Charlotte. So we are going to be talking about digital accessibility today. I'm going to try to do a lot of examples for you all because I think those are the most helpful. Please put questions in the chat. I'll try to get to them either as we go or at the end and make sure I can cater this as best as possible towards the work you all are doing. So the first thing I like to start off is, what is this digital accessibility thing? Why are we making these efforts? So a way to think about digital accessibility, I like to compare it to accessibility in the physical world because we have a little bit more experience with that usually. So if you think about things like wheelchair ramps that are installed on buildings, those are accessibility efforts made to make access to a building easier for all kinds of folks. So the first thought you might have is, okay, we put in these ramps for wheelchair users to meet the ADA law, things like that. Well, there are ADA laws that apply to digital spaces as well, and they are also changing a lot right now. So there's more requirements for what we need to do as NC State and as any organization that serves the public to make sure our websites are also accessible to everybody. So it's an equivalent to that wheelchair ramp. But I also like to think about how that not only serves folks that have disabilities to make these changes, but it also serves everybody, right? So just like a wheelchair ramp, you install that on your building and it makes your building more accessible to everyone. So not just wheelchair users, someone might have a stroller they need to get in the building with, and that ramp helps them. Someone might have a temporary disability. So disabilities aren't always permanent. Sometimes someone has one for a bit and then they don't. So if they have crutches, a ramp might be helpful. Or it might just be someone moving some big equipment or something and using a dolly, and suddenly that ramp helps them as well. Same goes for the changes I'm going to talk to you about in how we do things on websites, on social media. These changes will impact users that have disabilities and how they interact with the web, but they will also help everybody. It will make it easier for everyone to access our content. And in extension, our main goal is spreading information, right? So making sure that anyone can access that information is really important, both legally and ethically, and just because it makes us accomplish our jobs better. As you're thinking about this, accessibility in both the digital and physical world is never perfect. It's always, you're striving to make it perfect, but you may never quite reach that. And so you're going to always be learning. I'm always learning something new or trying to figure out some new format for some different kind of content. So be open to that. Be open to, just trying your best to meet these things, and don't let the pressure of trying to get it perfect stop you from trying. You can think about these questions as you're trying to figure out what makes something digitally accessible. And rather than memorizing every single rule, if you think about these questions, that can help guide the actions that you decide to take. Because sometimes the rule might make sense in one circumstance, and in another you might have to adjust a little bit. So hopefully these questions can help guide you. So as you're publishing things online or sharing things online, you want to think about Could someone with low vision or no vision still access this information? So there is technology like screen readers that folks use. It's called assistive technology, and it may read the content out loud to someone. And we'll talk about the things you can do to make sure that technology works effectively so that someone who can't see it can still get the information through their ears. Can someone who can't hear access the information? So on the flip side, we all like captions. We all use captions from time to time on video, right? So if they can't hear the audio content, can they still access the information? And then it also is cognitive. So you want to make sure users can understand the information you're sharing. So a lot of times our audience is the general public, or it might be a more specific audience who has a bit more knowledge depending on what you're working on. So you want to think about your audience. Will they understand the information? If we're using really specific extension-y terminology, maybe we need to add some definitions in there, things like that to ensure that our content is understandable. And then the last thing is how easy is it to interact with? Whatever you're making or creating, you want it to be user friendly, right? We've all encountered websites that aren't, or you're trying to fill out a form and you can't figure out what you're doing wrong, things like that. So testing things, practicing the things to see, is this something someone can work through logically and simply and smoothly? Now I'm going to dive into some of the ways we accomplish that goal, and I'm going to do some examples and things. So we'll be hopping from different types of content and covering a lot of stuff. So feel free to pop in if you have any questions, add them to the chat. The first thing I'm going to talk about is something called alternative text or alt text. So anytime you are adding an image online, if it's in an email, if it's in a website, a newsletter, a social media post, you should have an option, and it's a little different from platform to platform, but you should have an option to add that alt text. And I'll go over some ways that you can do that depending on where you are. A lot of times it's simply by right-clicking the image after you upload it, there will be an option to add alt text. And what that alt text does is it describes the picture to someone who can't see the picture. So it's succinct, it's short and sweet, but it's like what you might describe it to someone over the phone. You know, they can't see the image, but you're telling them about what's in the image. So here's a picture, and the alt text for this picture might be two youth laying in a field looking at a butterfly with a magnifying glass. So if someone couldn't see this picture, if it didn't load or they couldn't see, they would still know the context of what's in that picture based on that brief description. Here's a different kind of image you might describe, because it's not just photos, but also any charts or graphs or infographics, things like that, that also need alt text. So if it's a graph, that can be harder, right? Because how do you describe a whole graph or a whole chart that has all these details in it? You have a limited number of characters for alt text a lot of times, like 100 to 200 letters that you can use. So you want to think about what is the purpose of this graph or chart in this content. So typically you're adding a graph or a chart to visually display some fact or some information. So you want to summarize it succinctly in the alt text. So in this example, I have a bar graph showing counties with the most number of samples submitted for 2022. And I'm mentioning that Wake County had 346 because that's this tall one on the left. So I'm pointing out the main point of this chart. But all this information might be important as well. So if you need more space to describe this chart, what you can do is do that within the content of your article or your page or whatever. Make sure that you're explaining the data. Maybe you list off these numbers for every county. You can do that in the actual visible text. Alt text is not visible to the eye. It truly is the alternate text that appears if there is not a visible image to someone or if the image doesn't load. So in your regular text that everyone can see, you can also describe your images in more detail if you have something more complex like a chart. This is a little screenshot of what might happen if a website doesn't load the images all the way. So you can actually see the alt text in this case. So alt text serves multiple purposes. Just like I was talking about with the wheelchair ramp, A lot of these things you do in the digital space have multiple benefits to them. So when you add alt text, if someone has a bad internet connection and their page only kind of half loads and the images don't load, they'll see the alt text, just like someone who's blind will hear the alt text read to them from their assistive technology. Even if my internet connection isn't great, will know, oh, okay, this is a picture of a potted cactus. This is a picture of a cover photo for a publication or something. So I get an idea of what would be there, even though I can't access that image. So it does that as well. It also actually helps with search engine results because the search engines are browsing the websites and they're seeing the alt text behind the scenes. And so that can help your content reach more people too. So alt text is really important. The more you can add it, the better. And it's important that you make it good alt text too. So the other thing about alt text, I think this is where we're starting to get better about adding alt text in places where it's required, like our extension websites and things now require it. But on social media, it is an option, and a lot of folks don't do it. Some of the social media will auto apply some AI generated alt text to your image to help folks out, but it's not going to have the context that you could provide about what that image actually is. So it might see a plant and say it's a plant. Whereas an extension master gardener volunteer or an extension professional, you probably know a little bit about that plant and why it's there, and you could describe that better. So on your social media, there should be a way for you to add that alt text. It might be a little different platform to platform. I'm going to show you on Instagram and Facebook real quick how to get to it, but I'll share these slides so that they can get shared out to you all, so you'll have these links to things. And I have a link here that goes platform by platform. Where do I find to add the alt text? And the last thing I'll say about that is if you can't find an option to add alt text, you probably can find the caption, and it's okay to put image description, colon, and put your alt text in the caption as a final result. If you can't find that option to add the actual alt text, the captions are also readable by screen reader devices, and so that will still be accomplished, basically. So let me go to some social media and show you what that looks like. So let's see. I'll just hop on my little Facebook here. I'll go to my profile and pretend I'm making a post here. So see if I remember how to make a Facebook post. Oh, down here. All right. So let's say I add a photo to Facebook, and I grabbed this little pollinator census graphic that you had here. Once you add a photo to your posts on Facebook or your events and things, you should see this little edit pencil for photos, and you can click on edit, and then you can see this tool for alt text. So it's not super visible as you're just filling stuff out. They don't ask for it right front and center. You kind of have to dig a little. So I click on edit, I go to alternative text, and you can see it's got this generated AI text. This is a little bit much for this. So I might just say like 2026 kickoff, Great Southeast Pollinator Census Flyer. So mine's a bit more succinct, but it's getting the point across of what this image is of. So you can see they kind of auto-generate it for you, but this is pulling all kinds of crazy, it's got the whole URL and stuff. So that's not ideal. That's why you need to go in and do this manually. And then I would hit done, and that alt text is now there. And if anyone's using assistive technology or their photo won't load, they will see that alt text, or they will hear that alt text. So that's Facebook. On Instagram, it's the same thing. So I've got my little image here. I can go to the three dots and click on edit. And there's this little accessibility section. And again, it's put in alt text for me. Their alt text says photo by Bethany Geiger on July 27th. That doesn't tell anything, but I could put variety of purple vegetables on a display or something. You know, it doesn't have to be super, super detailed. Think about the context of why that image is being shared. The purple is the point in this image, so I'm focusing on purple, but maybe you would get more specific and talk about, oh, there's some eggplant and some green beans and potatoes and onions, and that's cool too. So be as specific as you think folks would want to know if they couldn't see it. So that's how to add alt text in those formats. Every other digital thing you do, you should be able to find a place to add alt text. Even in my slideshow here, the images have alt text, and I just right click on them and click add alt text to do that. So You'll learn as you make this a habit where to find those, and it'll get easier. The other thing to think about is, how do I write good alt text, right? That can be tricky, especially depending on how complex your images are. So things I see a lot are, I've got an image here, it might have a caption. And remember, your caption is visible to everyone. So they can see this, they can read this, assistive technology can also. Your alt text is invisible. A lot of times I see a duplicate. Someone's just copied and pasted. They're moving quick and they're like, oh, I got a caption, I'll just stick that in alt text. Well, that's not providing anything additional. That's not helpful. So I know this figure 1 and it's called raised beds. That's not good alt text. So we won't go with that. What about a toddler tips a watering can to water plants? Do we think that's good alt text? Yeah, that's great alt text, especially if you consider whatever the purpose this image is serving in your content. If you're just talking about kids helping in the garden, this is a real basic detail about what's going on in this photo. Folks don't need to know about the fence back here or the garden wall or anything. It's really about children helping in the garden. So, and they may want to know that it's a toddler. Or maybe it's even more vague. It's a child helps in the garden, that still covers it. You might have the instinct to talk about what the child is wearing, what they're carrying, what plants are in the raised beds, that they are raised beds. And you can add those details. Just think about, like, is that relevant? Is that the purpose of the photo or not? Sometimes folks struggle between, what's the difference between my alt text and my caption? And I like to think about, the alt text is what you can gather visually. So if I can just look at this image and I don't know anything else about it, what do I know? The caption can provide more context that you can't get just looking at the image. So if it's a photo of people, your caption might have their names, it might talk about what the location is, details like that you can't gather just necessarily looking at it. And then the alt text would be more about what they look like or where they're standing or what they're doing in the image. And then we can get even harder. We're just going to keep getting harder with the alt text as we go. So something like this is more of an infographic, right? So it's highlighting some data here. We've got the impact of EMG volunteers, so how many and how many hours and all of this is the purpose of this image, right? More even than this kind of visually nice image of some action going on. So for something like this, my alt text might actually focus on these details. I might make the alt text just say, Extension Master Gardener 2025 snapshot, 4,103 volunteers, blah, 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 and read off those 4 data points, because that's more the purpose of the alt text in this case. That might get kind of long and it might not fit in your alt text. So the other thing you can do is just ensure that all these data points are in your regular text of your article. Because if they're there, then that information is available and folks don't need that. And this is more decorative, right? It's more kind of a visual addition for those folks. And so your alt text could be simple and it could just be talking more about the actual photograph within this image. So you can go both ways with it. The important thing is to make sure that everyone has access to the same information. Now we're going to get one more level more complicated, and we're going to talk about flyers in Canva a little bit. So I love Canva. We all probably are using Canva these days, and that's great. It's really good for making visual graphics for flyers, for the web, for social media. You should continue to use, that's totally fine. But it's all about how you use those graphics that you make in Canva, whether they'll be accessible or not. So here's an example. I have a little flyer for this fake Apple festival. And if I take this picture of this flyer and I post it on social media, or I post it on the website that I have, or I share it in an email and I don't provide any text alongside it, if someone's assistive technology encounters this picture, they see this as an image. So it has text on it, but the way Canva and these graphic design type of programs work, they save this when you download it as an image file or a PDF file or something that the assistive technology can't recognize that text very easily. Technology is getting a little better at this. There are some tools folks can use and stuff to pull that out, but it's not automatically accessible to everyone if they're not using these extra tools. So the way to handle that is, when you share those details, you want to include all of the text, all those important details that are in the flyer, as plain text alongside it. And that might feel a little bit repetitive. And so as you're doing that, you might realize, oh, maybe I don't need all the text information within the flyer. Maybe the flyer's focused on catching people's attention and the visuals and less on all of the information. And the information might be more text-based alongside your graphic. So you might be simplifying your flyers and things, because we've come from thinking about flyers as paper, right? We make a flyer, we print it off, we hang it on a wall, and it has to have everything on it. If you're making a graphic for the web, you might not need all those details within the graphic itself. Those could actually go in the text alongside it. So let's do kind of an example of that with a Facebook event. So I've got my little Facebook here. I'm going to create a new event, and I'm going to add my image here. And this is like a flyer about a plant sale that I stole from someone. And it's not the best option for a Facebook event because it's not very horizontal, but I've got my little flyer here. So then I can put all my details here. So I would probably want to use a simpler graphic than this for this, right? Probably just something that has a plant and maybe the title, not all of this text information, because that doesn't look as nice here. But for the sake of including all the information, I've put that there, and then all the details go actually in this part of my post where it's written in text, and that is accessible to everyone. So I can add my title of my event, and then all those who, what, when, where, and why, all those details can go right here. And that means folks can click on your registration links. Sometimes social media doesn't let you do that, and that's because they want to keep folks on their particular social media, and that's why we use Go links and things. But folks can highlight if they want to copy and paste the event details into an email to share with their friends. It's more accessible to them too. So screen readers and sharing the information and copying and pasting, all these things and links, all of that works a lot better when you do it that way. One little trick I want to show you, because it's really handy and has made my life a lot easier, and I think will make other folks' lives a lot easier, especially if you're having someone else made the flyer or something, they're sharing it with you, you don't have that text to just copy and paste readily. That can get frustrating. So you can actually pull text from an image. If you have something, it's like a flyer or something, this one's kind of basic. So I've got this little event. It's got a title, a date, a time, and a location in it. If you're in Chrome for your internet browser, you can actually take that flyer image, right click on it, and do search with Google Lens. And what it'll do, it pulls up like a Google search, Google Gemini thing on the side. I'm going to ignore that. That's not the important thing for me. When I do that search, it actually pulls that text out of this image. Like, it uses the magic of Google AI or whatever to pull that text out of the image. And so you can click on copy text on the left-hand side here and copy and paste that into your event description or whatever you're working on. If you have it in Canva already, copy and paste it from Canva. But sometimes someone has shared an image file with you that has text embedded in the image and you need to grab it. If you have it in the Chrome browser, you can do that as a little time-saving trick. And then you could paste your event details in here, and you'll probably have to clean it up a little bit and say, oh, I don't need all this, but I need that, because it might grab some stuff that's not super relevant. But you could go like that, and now I've got those text details in there, and the text is accessible. So just remember, text within images is not accessible by itself. Add those details, those links, all that stuff in plain text alongside it, whether you're posting on social media, on a website, in an email, whatever it may be. That way too, if I do alt text for this image, I don't have to include all of this stuff in my alt text. I can say Apple Festival flyer, and that's my alt text, because they can access all the other stuff in the regular text. One last thing on kind of flyers and images and stuff is something I see a lot is our accommodation statements, or our statements like NC Cooperative Extension is an equal opportunity, etc. Those statements will be in your Canva flyers or your graphics that you've made. And again, it's embedded text. So our accommodation statements having to do with disabilities might be very inaccessible to folks with disabilities because we're embedding that in an image. So that's another place where, sure, you can keep that in your Canva flyers. You probably should, especially if you're printing those. But you can paste that text directly in your event descriptions or in your articles and stuff as well. And then you're ensuring that important statement that lets people know that we can make accommodations for them is accessible to them if they are low vision or can't see. Someone is mentioning, if PowerPoint is used to create a flyer, does the info still appear as an image file? And yes, it depends on if you're using PowerPoint to create a flyer and you're downloading and saving, that slide will be an image. If you share the PowerPoint directly, then the alt text and the headings and stuff that you've added to your PowerPoint will stay with it. So it's anytime you're converting from one format to another, that's when you can lose stuff and it can become flat and static. So keep in mind, what is your final destination for the object, and just make sure if it's in the original format, a lot of times the accessibility stuff is still built in, but if you've transferred it, sometimes that stuff gets lost and you have to add things back. All right, so that's my end bit on alt text, and now I'm going to talk about PDFs. Oh, and I'll just mention for flyers too, if you're printing it out to hand out on paper or to hang up somewhere, alt text and stuff, once it's on paper, it doesn't matter. So that's a visible thing. There are tools that folks who are blind can use to scan things with their phone and stuff. So they have ways around that. But your printed materials and things, you should focus more on like color contrast, like are the visuals okay? Can I read the flyer? That sort of thing. And you don't have to think as much about how the technology interacts with that paper flyer. So you might have two designs even. You might have a paper flyer and a web flyer or things like that and separate those out a little bit. PDFs are something you might hear a lot of complaining about or concern about. And so I just want to give a little background on PDFs. PDF files have been used a ton. Historically, they've been the go-to document file for programming and things because they're great for printing. And we've moved from a more print-heavy world to a more digital world. And they're not designed well to work with that assistive technology and things. They're really designed for printing. So when you're thinking about PDFs or when you're thinking about sharing content, whether it's a newsletter or a form or whatever it may be, I really encourage you to move away from PDFs if you can, and to reserve PDFs for printing and as a secondary, like, supplemental option. So, right, you might have a digital form folks can fill out, and then you attach a PDF if someone wants to print it and do it on paper. They have that option, but it's not the primary option because you can make them accessible. I'll tell you, it's a pain. It's time consuming and annoying and frustrating for the most part. And the more complicated your document is, the more time consuming and frustrating it is to get it right, to make it accessible. So I will provide you a link to learn about how to make accessible PDFs. The best way to do that is to move from Microsoft Word, Adobe InDesign, or Google Docs, and then convert it to a PDF to get alt text and tagging and all these things in that document. But my primary recommendation is try to stop using PDFs, or anytime you need to consider a PDF, really think about, does it have to be a PDF? If it's a form, try to do an online registration like Eventbrite, or a Google form is really accessible. Go that route first, and then you can always attach a PDF as a supplement. As, okay, if you really want to do this the old-fashioned way, you can print this off, fill it out, and bring it into the office or whatever. So it will take a lot of adjusting because I know a lot of us have been using PDFs for things and we're familiar with that format. So be patient with yourself, but really try to consider whenever you go to update something or make a new thing, does this need to be a PDF? Can I do it a different way? I saw another question about paper flyers. Is it okay to put a QR code that takes the person to a website where it's going to have the alt text information? Yeah, and QR codes on paper flyers is where QR codes should be. That is where the QR codes should be. QR codes on the website is okay, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because usually if you're on the website, you can click it on your phone, or on the website, you can just click it. Whereas a paper flyer, you can't click the URL, you need to transfer it to your device. If I come across a QR code when I'm on my computer, I can't click on the QR code to go to the link. I need a regular link to click on. So keep that in mind. Don't just put a QR code online, but QR codes for printed flyers are perfect. Charlotte asked if including a PDF online for printing is there language we should use to clarify the PDF is for that purpose only. And I don't know if there's like an official recommendation on this, but I would say yes. Whenever you have attached a PDF to something for that purpose, say something like PDF available for printing link or something like that with the title of the document. And if you say PDF available for printing, that kind of clues folks in like this is the same information. It's not additional information. It's just the same information in a printable format. And so that makes it clear that it's a supplement, not additional information that folks that can't access it will be missing out on. They'll be like, oh, I've got all that as my primary format, but if I need the print, I can get to it. One thing about when you're making PDFs, sometimes you'll see an option to print to PDF. That is the worst way to make a PDF. That makes it a completely flat image, just like we were talking about with the Canva flyers. It's just a picture of text, not text itself. So avoid that unless you are strictly printing it. If you just need to print it, that's okay. All right, that's the end for PDFs for now. We'll move into some other things. For color, when you're thinking about using color, try to make sure you're not using color as a primary way of distinguishing information. And I think we can all think of why that might be a bad idea. And that's because we all see color a little differently. And so some folks are colorblind or completely blind. They might not be able to access that information. And some of us just might have trouble telling a few shades apart or something like that. Or we might print something off on a black and white printer, and then that color information is lost, right? So if you have a chart or a graph, don't use just color. Make sure you can still use color. Color is great for visual users, but make sure you add labels as well so that if I go print this chart and it's all grayscale, I still know what each of these little pie slices are. If you need a key to describe your table data or your charts or your graphs, that's not good. We don't want a key. We want that labeled directly on the content. That way, someone doesn't have to go, is that the purple slice or the pink slice? And then try to figure it out. Just add labels and that will be a drastic improvement for that. Continue to use color though, because that does make it more accessible as well to have that easy differentiation by color, but don't make it the only way to distinguish. Okay, that was just a little demonstration before I talk about captions. So you probably all had a hard time hearing what that video was about, and that's the point. There's some background noise playing of a restaurant or something. So captions on your video content that you do is really important for everybody. I'm someone who uses captions on anything I watch. Whenever I watch TV, I want captions. But you might be in a noisy environment where you can't hear the video very well and you need captions. You might be in a quiet environment where you don't want to disturb people, but you're trying to get access to the information and you'll want captions. Or you might actually not be able to hear and you need those captions to access the information. So any video content that you make or post or share should have captions. The easiest way to do that is YouTube. If you don't have access to a YouTube account, you might need someone to help you do the captions after they upload them, things like that. YouTube does automatically provide auto-generated captions that are pretty good. That's why I generally recommend using YouTube to share your video. Canva has options to add captions, so you might have access to Canva as a volunteer. If you use the free Canva version or something, you may be able to add captions that way. But YouTube does a really great job of adding captions. The auto-generated captions are good and they're getting better every day, but you do need to review them and edit them because especially in extension, we have some funny words that the auto-generator might not be as likely to pick up on. And so you want to review those and make sure they're correct. And it shouldn't take you too much time to do that, to just glance through them and make sure everything's good and make a few corrections. I can show you that a little bit real quickly too. That's a great question on audio only posts. If it's like a podcast or an MP3 file, instead of a caption for those, upload a transcript. So some of if you use Buzzsprout or some of the podcasting platforms will do that for you. similar to YouTube, but you might have to do it manually. And yeah, it's a little bit of extra work, but it does serve a great purpose, and it is technically also required now. So do include a text transcript. It can be as simple as a link to a Google Doc that has all the text in it if there's no other way to share that information. But it's helpful for all kinds of folks too, because maybe they don't have time to listen to your full audio podcast, but they might have time to skim over the text and find the section that they are interested in too. So that's super helpful. Here's my YouTube. I'm gonna go to my random videos that I have on here. See if I can figure out where they live. Cute. I don't use YouTube a whole lot. Bear with me. Oh, here we go. My videos. So when you upload a video to YouTube, it will have an option for you to add captions. Here it is, subtitles. And when you click on that, you'll see that they do automatic captions, and it will automatically publish those, but you can go in and click this little edit pencil, and you can go look through these captions here and make sure that it's right. Like here it says County 4 News. That's definitely 4-H News, things like that. And so once you make those changes, you can publish, and instead of it just being the automatic captions, it's the automatic captions that you've edited, and those will be far superior than the regular generated captions. But YouTube does do a really impressive job. It gets better every time I use it. I'm more impressed with that. All right. And yep, if you have old YouTube videos, you should be able to go in and re-add those if they don't have them already. Just go to that video, look for this little subtitles button to click on them and add them. And you can see, you can just add your own manually, or you can start with the auto captions and edit them either way. And YouTube will also make a full transcript alongside your video when you have captions too, so folks can search through that or copy and paste it or print it off or anything like that if they want to do. We walked through all of those things, I think. And now I'm going to just jump back and talk some more about color. Why not? So another thing to consider with color is color contrast. So how readable is your content? And there's actually a rating scale for that. We are shooting for AA or AAA rating. So AA is good, AAA is, your extra above and beyond good contrast. What first obvious way to check for color contrast is your own eyes. If you have good eyes, you can look and say, like, you all looking at this right now are probably like, yeah, that's bad. That's bad contrast. Light purple on light purple is not good. Lime green on white's not good. Some of it might be obvious. Some of it might be less obvious. It might be a gray on a white. That's okay, but maybe a little too light. And so there's some tools you can use for that. My favorite is just like a web browser extension. So again, I'll share these slides. You have links to all these tools and stuff if you want to start using them. But I have a color contrast checker right in my web browser in Chrome, and I can just click on it and it will analyze the page I'm on and tell me if there are issues and what the contrast levels are and whatnot. And it doesn't like working while I'm doing a Zoom share, I have learned. So you get the idea of what goes on here, and right here it should tell you the color contrast. But for some reason, it does not enjoy while I'm Zoom sharing to do that and work properly. But there are many different tools like this that will show you the color contrast and whether it's a pass or kind of a fail. And then you can darken up the text and lighten up the background until the contrast is good enough. Those are built into a lot of tools as well. Like in Microsoft Word, they have an accessibility checker that will consider color contrast and things. So there are a lot of tools you can use to check for that. There's also this colorblind web page filter. If you're ever curious and you want to look at a web page and see how it might look to a person with color blindness, this is the EIT page. You can put in any URL for any website here, and you can actually pick the type of color blindness. So the one I've got it set on right now is a type of red-green color blindness, and we use a lot of red on our content. I always say don't put red and green on top of each other, right next to each other, because sometimes those are hard to differentiate. And you can see here that if I can't tell red from green and it looks green, it still is readable, right? It looks funny to me, but you can still read the text and everything, and it's okay. What you don't want to see is if suddenly you can't read the text, because maybe I used green text on a red background, and those are indistinguishable for somebody. It might not work great. And you can change these up. It's just fun to see the different ways your site might look to different folks and can give you an idea of if you need to adjust anything there. All right, next thing I'm going to talk about is headings. So headings are, we think about like headlines when we look at a newspaper, you skim the headlines to find the article you want to read. Headings kind of work that way digitally. So folks who use assistive technology can skim through headings using their audio tools. So rather than reading the whole page top to bottom, they can, just like someone with eyes can scan for the section they need, they can listen for the heading they need. And so it's important that you structure them properly so folks can navigate your content. So this is good for long articles, newsletters, even emails and things, is that you add appropriate headings. What I see a lot is folks see an option to change the heading level on their text, and they say, oh, I want my text to be bigger, so I'll select heading 2. That's the biggest looking text. That is not what it's designed for. So don't do that if it's not truly a heading of a section of content. So maybe you're just like, I want this little statement to stick out, but it's not a heading. Don't apply a heading to it. The other thing with headings is you don't ever want to skip a heading level. So generally, wherever you're adding them, you might see that there's a heading 1 available or not. Heading 1 is your title. So on like our websites and email campaigns and stuff, you might not see a heading 1 option, and that's because your title is automatically the heading 1. But you could have 5 heading 2s, as of however many of each of these heading types. What you can't do is skip one, right? So I can't have a heading 2 with a heading 4 and no heading 3 before it. So it's like title, heading, subheading, subheading of the subheading. So they're nested like that. And so you want to think about that kind of organizational structure or outline of your content as you're adding them. So I'm going to pop over to Google Docs here real quick just so you can see what that kind of looks like. Here. Not letting me type. Well, okay, I'll just highlight something. So it's probably, oh, I don't have edit access for this document. Let me open a new document. Here we go. Heading 1. So your text that's your heading 1, you can highlight it in Google Docs, and you see where it says normal text. That's all your other paragraph text. But you can go in here and you can actually assign headings to things. And you can see on the left here, it's going to start creating an outline of my document. So I might have a subheading, and this one is a heading 2. And so it does change the font and size and stuff a little bit automatically, but the purpose of this heading thing is really the structure of the document, not so much the font and size. You can change that as well to whatever you want it to be, but make sure you're also assigning these headings because that's what allows folks to see the outline of your document and the structure there. And then, you can have multiple headings at the same level, just you cannot skip headings there. And I've got some resource links that include stuff about headings. You can deep dive on that if you want to learn more about how that structure works or if you have any questions about them. And now we'll go to newsletters. And newsletters are a little tricky because, like I said, a lot of us have used PDFs traditionally for making newsletters, and that is not recommended going forward. If you can transfer from a PDF, I highly recommend doing so that you can ensure they are digitally accessible. I wish I could tell you, do it in Canva or do it in Adobe Express because those are super user-friendly to create in. Unfortunately, they still have some digital accessibility issues, particularly when it comes to sharing things like newsletters. They do allow you to share it as like a live HTML link so that the text is recognizable. The problem with them is they don't do a good reading order. So reading order is what tells assistive technology the order to read the document. If you're a sighted user and you come across a document, you can figure it out. You can look at it. You probably start at the top left and you work your way down. If there's columns, you can follow the flow. If you're not a sighted user, you depend on the computer reading it in the proper order. And Canva and Adobe Express right now, if you use those to make a live link newsletter, it will read it in the order not of the page, but that the creator added elements to that newsletter as they were building it. And most of us, when we're building a newsletter, we don't start in the top left and slowly add stuff. We might start here and add a picture here and add a link. And if you have multiple columns, if you have anything funny, it's going to read it all crazy. And you might have it read this newsletter where they read the title of an event and then the time for a different event, because it's going to hop all over the page and not be in order. So that's why I say don't do those. Hopefully they'll fix that. I think that the pressure of some changes in digital accessibility right now may lead them to improve those features, and that might be an option in the future. So stay tuned. I'm keeping an eye on Canva in particular and letting Canva folks know that we want this. So I hope that they'll adjust that. In the meantime, the best formats for a newsletter are a web page, a web post, or like a newsletter campaign program like ActiveCampaign. Now, this creates some more challenges for volunteers in particular because you may not have access to the website that stuff is getting posted on directly. And so probably in the past, you might have forwarded a PDF and someone posted that for you or something. So you will have to kind of work with those folks that have assisted you. Maybe the best way is for you to send a Google Doc or a Word document and some separate image files, and they turn that into a web post. You copying and pasting that stuff in, that's my best recommendation. It is a little more time consuming, like a lot of this stuff is, but it is important. The other thing, kind of last resort, if you can't do a web page, a web post, or ActiveCampaign, I would do a Google Doc before I would do a PDF. It's just going to be a little bit more accessible. It's not ideal, but it's still going to be better than a PDF. Unless you're a real go-getter and you want to learn how to make a perfectly accessible PDF, which can be done. And it actually can be done in a not too difficult way using Google Docs and a Grackle extension, which is something I've linked in here, and then converting that to a PDF. The key with doing that, if you're going to go the PDF route, is simpler is better. So one column, top to bottom, work your way down, apply your headings, apply your alt text, all that stuff in Google Docs, and then convert it to a PDF, and it should keep that reading order right, and it should keep the alt text and all of that in there. But you're gonna need to do some learning to get that process nailed down, and you're gonna need to know how to check that PDF to make sure it's good before you upload it. So again, you could include a PDF as like a print option if that's something you want to do alongside a web post or a web page or ActiveCampaign or something. That would be okay. But the primary formats we kind of want to shift to is more that web-based if you're doing a web newsletter and not, printing it off and mailing it to everybody. I'm going to show you some actual newsletter examples to give you an idea of like what a web newsletter looks like, right? So here is from Rockingham 4-H, just so you can get an idea, because I recently worked with them on this. So you can see they've been doing PDF newsletters forever, and they've got this year's first few months as PDFs. So you can click on that and see this is what they had. So if a screen reader encountered this, they would probably see, a 4-page PDF. It might be able to read some of this. It might not read it in the right order, especially with all these columns and things. This is really made to print and mail the way this looks, right? So moving forward, what they've done is they've worked to make this a web post. So they've got there's the same newsletter landing page, but they add a web page each time they'll make a new month's newsletter, and they do the newsletter directly on the web page itself. So they've got images and little descriptions for kind of each of these events and things that are happening, and it's built right into the website as a newsletter. And all of this content is then digitally accessible because our website is designed to be. So it's a big transformation in how they have to think about what they are posting and how they're prepping for it. So if you're someone who helps with a newsletter and someone else posts it, maybe you send them a Google Doc that has all this text that they would plug into the website, and then a separate link to a Google Drive folder with all these images or something. You want to kind of work out that process between you so that it's as smooth as possible, and it'll take some adjusting and some work to get the hang of it, but it will be very worthwhile. The other cool thing is this newsletter is very searchable. It's very much better picked up by search engines. So this is going to be more visible to everybody on the internet. When they're doing searches about events and stuff, they might actually fall into this link. These PDFs, the Google search engine isn't digging that deep into your PDF files to see what those events it's talking about in there are. So it's not going to pick them up as well. And then let me see here. Have some other ones. I mentioned ActiveCampaign. Extension employees have access to this. It is a paid program, so you may not. But I want to just mention if you use some kind of other program to share a newsletter, you still have to do it in an accessible way. So this one is not accessible. This newsletter was made in ActiveCampaign, which I highly recommend to make an accessible newsletter, but they just pasted Canva flyers into the newsletter. And as we've talked about, the text within these Canva flyers not accessible to assistive technology. I can't click on the links if there are any. I can't highlight the text. It's just a picture, right? They've luckily linked it to their stuff, so it's a little bit better, but that's not ideal. So we worked with this county to change that and to do it a little bit differently, still the same newsletter, but this is actually a different county, but this is what I've instructed them to change to, is you've got your newsletter here, you've got maybe simpler graphics, not a full flyer here, but your details are in the text. And you've got your photos and the text alongside it. And so this is accessible. You know, who, what, when, where, and why, and how, and the links for registration and stuff are all in the text part. And then you can have your visuals and your Canva graphics and stuff for visual information. Someone says MailChimp works well, and I think that should be very similar to ActiveCampaign, totally okay to use as long as you're doing this, making sure that the text is available separate from just being embedded in images, and then it should be great. So that's newsletters. And then I'm gonna try to fly through a few more of these things so I can give some more time for questions. The next thing I want to talk about is descriptive links. So this is something I see a lot of errors with, just because old habits on how we used to do links when links were new. So when you are linking to something in text, you want to keep these questions in mind. Is it descriptive? So you're not going to put click here, read more, things like that. Reason for that is someone who uses assistive technology might scroll through a list of links. They might go through the page. What are the links? And it'll say, click here, read more, read more. That doesn't tell you anything. Even if it says register, you might want to say instead, register for event name. And that whole link name tells where the link is going. That's what the link text should do. It should describe the destination of where that link goes if someone clicks on it. Is the link precise? So only link the name. Don't link the full sentence, but link the part that is the destination of where it's going. And then is it visually clear? Links should look a little different from the rest of the text so that someone can visually tell, oh, that's a link. Typically that means underlined and maybe a different color font. Most things do that for you. So if you do an email, if you do a web post, if you do things like that and you assign a link to something, it'll pretty much do that for you. But just keep that in mind. And then does it use a raw URL? Don't just put http dot dot blah, blah, in the whole thing, the whole URL as a link. That doesn't look pretty. And if someone's using a screen reader, it's going to read off that whole string of letters. It's going to be very annoying. It's going to take a while to do that. Go links, that is an exception, right? Because those are to be designed to be short and sweet and for folks to maybe even like remember and type in manually. So go links are okay to show like that. But if you're doing it on the website and not on a flyer, you might want to think about, instead of a go link, actually just doing a descriptive link that says like register for and the program name or something. And then my last thing here is, does it link to the original source? If you're linking to a resource like a publication, a document, a PDF, something like that, try to link to where that document lives that you found it, rather than downloading that document and re-uploading it in a new place. Because if you link to the original source, if that original creator of the document makes any updates, your link is still good. It still goes to the proper edition, the new edition. If you download a separate copy and upload it and link to that, it might be replaced in the other place and you wouldn't know. You would still be linking to this older version, and then you end up with like old versions of stuff all across the web. So that's just a good practice. It also gives credit to the original creator by sending folks to whoever made that resource. So Nancy asked about if I could clarify what to use instead of the raw URL, and I will do that on this next slide. And then we have a district newsletter that includes one-page articles from HORT agents. We have previously used PDF with links to Google Docs for each article on a web page newsletter work. I would maybe do that if you can do that within like website articles instead of Google Docs, that might be better, but we could totally meet up and talk sometime and brainstorm a good way to do that, Allison. But for raw URL, instead of typing out HTTP blah, blah, blah for the link text, you want descriptive text that has the link. So here I have some practice for you all, and you can use the chat maybe if you want. We'll go through these and see what's wrong with each one. So what's wrong with the first link? This one's pretty obvious. It's vague. It's not descriptive. Click here. Any click here, read more, link here, link below, and stuff like that. Avoid being vague. Say exactly where it's going. So instead of that, you might say, to get the full departmental report, you might need to rework your sentences sometimes to fix this. So I might say, read the full departmental report, colon, and then the title of the report would be there, highlighted and linked to. If that makes sense. This next one, what's wrong with this one? It's the raw URL, it's the full URL. So what might we put instead? You can download the latest safety guidelines at, instead of this full raw URL, we might just say latest policy guidelines document or something, you know, name the destination. What is the title of that document if they click on it? And then we've got another read more here, and we could fix that one by just changing what part is linked, right? So I could say for details on our new software, read more on, and then I could link product features and pricing webpage, because again, I'm linking the destination of where that link goes so that they know exactly, oh, if I click on this, I'm going to the product features and pricing webpage. And then this last one, what's the problem with that last one? It's just the whole sentence. It's too much. So I would probably just link wine grape grower's guide, and the rest would just be the plain sentence. So practice with that. You will find you might need to rework your sentences to get it just right, and sometimes it's a little hard to figure out. But I always try to think, what's the name of the website? What's the name of the document? What is the title of what I am going to is the best way to link. If you're doing registration links, I like to say register for program name so that if there's a lot of them on one page, it's clear which link I'm at. And then original source, I just mean if you are, that would just be if it was like a PDF or a resource on another page. You wouldn't want to take this PDF of the latest policies if it was from another website, download it and upload it on your website. You would want to link directly to the original file on the other website. So it's like you're not stealing someone's resource and reposting it as your own, you're linking to theirs, and then folks can still access it from your content, but it makes sure that if there are any updates or any changes, that those stay. So these are, again, I'll send these slides out so you have access to all these resources and tools and things. Yeah, I can demo a email descriptive link for sure. That's a great idea. So I'm going to pull open an email here, just hit reply. Let's say I was replying to this email and I would say, thanks. Here are the presentation slides. And then I might do, again, you're doing this, the destination. So I'm going to use the title of my presentation as what I'm linking. So I do the plain text of, you know, this descriptive text, then highlight the text, then add my link to it. So I'll grab my link here, copy, and I'll put in the URL here. So the URL isn't visible, but this description that I've put in is. So do your text first, highlight the text, and then add your link, rather than just copying your link directly in here. If you do copy your link directly in there, you can add the link and go to change, and then change the text to whatever it might be, presentation slides, something like that. Does that make sense? Maria, it actually does apply across the board a little bit. So for state work, volunteers might get out of this a little bit, But if you're an extension professional and you're sending emails, it does apply to emails. You should get in the habit of, making sure you add alt text in your emails if you add an image to them, making sure you do links like this. Think of it as applying across the board. Even if it's not a legal requirement, getting in the habit will make sure you're covered. Even if it's an internal document, that's a lower priority, meaning it's not public facing, the audience is smaller, all of that stuff. Then you have less concern basically that folks are going to miss out on the information if you don't make it accessible. But if you make this part of your habit, it's going to be so much easier than swapping back and forth and going, oh, I'm making this public, I got to do. Just try to do it across the board and you'll be in better shape. It is going to take some time and you'll forget a lot. I forget all the time, but the more you do it, the more consistent it will be. And then there is some worry about not knowing to click on links if it doesn't say click here. I think these days folks pretty much know if it's a link because we've developed the just general understanding of if it's underlined, if it's a different color, it's a link. But if you are concerned in any way, you can do something like I showed in this slide before. You could say, for details on our new software, read more on the, and that's a link. So that kind of gives that kind of introduction to them saying, oh, blah, 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 and it's a link. Whereas if I just put the line and just said product features and pricing webpage and linked that, maybe that without the introduction, maybe that would be less clear. So you can certainly add some introductory stuff, but click here is too vague and folks know how to click link. If they're on the computer, they're getting the hang of clicking on links when they see them. It's, not across the board. There's people that may not know that, but I think you're pretty safe with just using the link formatting. When we link to a PDF, do we add a comment that the pub PDF is provided for printing? And yes, you should probably do that. Like a printable PDF is available, and the link to the title of the document or something. And then on Google Docs is very similar to what I did in the email, where you just find your text that you want to link, you highlight it, and I gotta do it on mine here, highlight it, and you go to the link thing, and then you can paste the URL in there, and that will make it a link. So think about your link text, and then highlight, and then add your link, and that should help you make them descriptive. Some other tools that you can maybe incorporate into your kind of day-to-day activities that should make things easier. Some of these I've mentioned, some I haven't. Got my view too big here. The Wave tool, I know there's a few folks that manage like Google sites or things outside of our extension websites. If you want to check the accessibility of your website, Wave is a great tool. So you can go to this Wave web address, or there's a Chrome extension you can install for Wave. And I've got some of those websites here, so not to call anyone out, but we're just gonna check a couple and see. So once you have that Wave extension installed in Chrome, you can just turn it on when you're on any website, and it does a review of the website and it looks for errors. And this one is not too bad. We've got 5 errors here. That's pretty fixable. It has a lot of alerts, and these are things you probably want to look at and maybe see if you can update. But if you're someone who manages a website like this, you might want to go through and see what errors do I have. This broken area reference, that might be something you can't really change. That's probably a Google problem and you're stuck. These contrast things you probably can change. So these are just, oh, the text is too light or something. So you can click on it to identify the location, and then you can go in and edit your template or whatever and make sure that text is dark enough and fix those things. And then you can recheck it with this. Sometimes with all these little labels that it pulls up, it's hard to see stuff. So I turn styles off, and then it simplifies it and you can find the location. And if you click on it, you can see what that is. And sometimes it's like hidden text or something weird. So if you have any trouble with something like that, we can definitely work on it together. Set up a meeting with me. We can see what we can do about that to fix it. Because sometimes you have access to change it. Sometimes if you're using Google Sites or something, it might be a widget or something where you can't really edit the text. And so we'll have to take a look and see if that's something we can fix. And yes, Melissa, I will have links to all of these different topics so you can dive into whichever ones are confusing, because I know for me, headings were really confusing at first. So I have a link here that kind of goes over each of these topics in depth and you can check those out. I talked about the color contrast checker and the colorblind web page filter. If you want to go above and beyond and experience what using that assistive technology is like, or test any of your content with a screen reader, Macintosh and Windows both have free built-in screen reader software. Chrome also does like a read aloud in the Chrome browser you can use to test. These all require a little learning to use them because a lot of times I think I've made an accessibility error, but it's really a user of the assistive technology error problem and me not understanding quite how to use voiceover or something. So do that with a grain of salt. Make sure you kind of evaluate, like, I think I did it right, but this seems like it's wrong. It might actually be an issue with how your settings are or something on the reader. But those can be really enlightening to try out to see what that experience is like if a voice reads off the whole URL. You'll be like, oh, I get why that's annoying. Or if it jumps all over the place on a newsletter, you're like, oh, okay, I see that's a problem. This link just has some more information about captioning and how to get some funding potentially if you need to do like outsource your captioning. But with YouTube, I don't think we have to do that as much anymore. Again, the link for the alt text by all social media platforms. You can go here and see, where do I find alt text on Instagram? Where do I find it on Facebook, X, Pinterest, any of those? And then these two extensions, one is called Grackle Docs and one is called Grackle Slides. You can just hop here on Google Chrome and install it, and it will go in those programs under extensions. And you can use this to check your accessibility of any of your documents if you're using Google Slides or Google Docs. And it will look for these concepts that I've been talking about: headings, color contrast, descriptive links, tables. It goes through all of that stuff and checks your document for any issues. And so you can see there's not much in this document, so I've got lots of green check marks. But if I have any errors, it will alert me to them and I can go and fix those. So see, it says link should be informative. That's the same concept as a descriptive link. And subheading is vague, so it's like, that's not a good link. So you can use those Grackle tools to check. Microsoft Word also has a built-in accessibility checker that will check for headings and color contrast and alt text and all that good stuff. So those are free tools that you can use. And then these are the links I was talking about that you'll have if you want to dive in more to these concepts and make sure you're understanding the ones that are a little trickier for you, because I think that's a little different for everybody. So this NC State Digital Accessibility Fundamentals page links to WebAIM, which is a great resource, and it does it by all of these kind of concepts we've talked about. So if you're like, I don't get headings, you can go here, click on headings, and read all about headings, how headings work. It has some really good examples and things and tips and common errors you might see with the wave tool and things. So we'll make sure you have access to all these links to dive into those if you want to look at more on how to do good alt text, how to write good links. There's great resources here, and these are all WebAIM, but they're on the NC State accessibility page. I also have a digital accessibility guide that I've made, and this should be public. I think anybody can access this site, and it links to just a bunch of resources, training things, some of my guidance for PDFs and for social media, newsletters, for using Canva with accessibility in mind, and just some tips and things. So feel free to dive around in there as well. And then NC State also has this great page for resources, which has a ton more trainings, ton more information about how to make different types of content accessible. So if you're like, I'm making an email, I'm making a PDF, I'm making a meeting, like what do I need to do? You can go through here, and it has a bunch of testing tools linked as well. So Grackle, Canva has an accessibility checker, all these different tools you can try to use. I know it's overwhelming that there's so much stuff, but it's also good that there's so much extra training and things you can do to keep learning. Just keep in mind it's going to be a lifelong process and you're never going to quite know it all, and that's okay. All right, I think that's all I have officially, but I would love to stay here and do any other examples or answer any questions that you might have. If I missed any, please let me know. I tried to answer them as they were relevant, but
There was just a couple of questions, I think back to the PDFs.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to, so if we have old like you showed the newsletter, the Rockingham County 4-H newsletter page, so they had those old PDFs there from, you know, they were dated. It was like this is from
Mm-hmm.
past. Do we need to worry about taking down old PDFs or can we?
No.
Okay.
Hopefully you like that answer.
Yes.
No, but so there is a clause. So this particular applies to the law, right? So there is a law that starts being enforced April 24th, coming up really soon here, that applies to digital content. And they have written into the law some caveats because the reality is government institutions, state institutions, educational institutions have PDFs littered all across the web. And like realistically, are we going to go back and be able to fix and remediate all of those in the next week? No. So the answer to that is you can eventually if you get to it, but if they are archival, like a newsletter, that falls under archival. So that's something that like that was a point in time in the past. That was the newsletter for March before the law was enacted. So that's a historical document now, and it lives like that. If someone needed access to that for some reason and they requested to us, hey, I can't read this, we'd need to go back and fix it for them. But outside of that, it's, used for maybe historical purposes, record keeping, that sort of thing. If you have an old PDF that you are actively still using for programming, so it's a registration form that you don't have an alternate option. It's a flyer for an upcoming event that hasn't happened yet. Those things you do need to go remediate. And some of those are tricky. You might have some really weird ones that you don't think about. Maybe it's a manual of some kind or some kind of guidebook or something, or like a worksheet that folks might be filling out actively for a program you do all the time. If it's stuff that's being used regularly, it's information that's going to continue to get accessed in the future, those are the things you want to start working towards updating, either by converting to a new format or making sure that PDF is accessible. The other piece of that is if you go back and edit something, so if you have just an informational guide posted somewhere, just a resource, it's probably gonna fall under that archival and be okay. But if on April 25th you go in and you republish that or you make a change and publish it, it's not archival anymore. Now it's after April
Mm,
24th, that applies under the law. So keep that in mind. If you touch it, it becomes not archival. You can also label those, right? So that can be a good practice to do, to say like newsletter archive and then have those listed. That kind of clues
mm.
it in that these are like allowed. And so there are different things you can do to rearrange stuff. But as you encounter those, the first question I would ask is, do I still need this? Because we got probably a lot of garbage that's carried on over. So first thing is clear it out. Then does it still need to be a PDF? If it does, you can say, is it archival? Can it stay, or do I need to work on updating that? And obviously it's going to take time to do that. So just keep working on it and we'll get there eventually. Good question.
Yeah. We have a couple of other questions about QR codes. So, as extension employees, we can use the Go link, uh,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, the Go links. We can go to Go links and create short links that generate QR codes. But a lot of our volunteers are doing some of this work and they can't access Go links. Is there a recommended QR code generator you would, other than Go links, you would
Yeah.
recommend for our volunteers to use?
I don't know of one offhand. I can do some research for y'all and see if I can find one that I feel confident about. You can probably just do a Google search for QR code generator and probably find something that'll work okay. But I'll do a little research just to make sure there aren't any security issues or anything you should be worried about. I also want to check because Canva and some of those tools might have something built in there. I'm not sure, but I'll take a look and maybe follow up with you and you can pass that along to folks. Because oh, look, there is one in Canva.
Yeah, I
Okay,
see
that's
there's
what
a
I was thinking. That
comment
might be the
saying it.
go-to then, because you're probably already using Canva. So that would be a great tool. I can actually look right now and see. My favorite thing to do in Canva these days is go to this help assist and ask it where something is. How do I make a QR code? Anyone can get a free Canva account that may have some limitations on features. So like the QR code thing, I don't know if it's a paid feature or not, but you can, if you have an email address, you can go to canva.com and you can get at least their free version of Canva. It says in the editor, go to the side panel and click apps, then search QR code. Oh, and I got a little tool right here. And I can open this app and enter the URL and make a QR code. Wow, so easy. Generate code. There you go. Easy as that. Then I have a QR code. So that's how it works in Canva. There are probably other options as well.
There was also a question about the law that's coming into place. Does it apply to Master Gardener volunteers? And yeah, I would say, yeah, if Master Gardener volunteers are creating content for extension audiences, then yes, this applies to all of our content we're creating for extension.
And what I don't have in the slides, and I'll go ahead and add it so that you all can access this. I'll stick the link in for those that want to look at this now. This is my go-to for understanding this law. It's from ada.gov and goes over this new accessibility law that starts April 24th, what it is, what it covers, exceptions, all that stuff. And it's a lot to absorb, but if you want to refer to that as you make judgment calls and stuff, I don't want you to be scared. I don't want you to be worried about lawsuits and things, but it is something we should definitely be working towards meeting these requirements. And look, I just shared the raw URL, so we're all learning here. I need to improve that, but there you go.
There was a question further back, just, again about linking to just the title of a document, concern about, for so long we taught people to look for things that say, click here, read more. If we stop using those words and instead just embed the link in the title of a document, are people going to understand that? The question was more around, do you see people not understanding? If the words click here aren't there, it's just the title. Are people getting that?
For the most part, people are, and I'll give you a little background so you can feel assured that I have an eye on this. I come from the public library world where I did a lot of work helping folks in computer labs with varying degrees of computer understanding, right? And seeing them interact with the web. So there are folks who probably will struggle with that, but there are folks who have no basic computer literacy to start with. So they've got some work to do on that. As long as it's formatted clearly, so if you're on our websites, you will see that they are underlined when they're a link. You'll see that your cursor changes. So it's a pointer arrow. And then when you're on a link, it changes to a hand when you're on Mac. Windows has a similar thing where you can tell like, oh, something's different about this when I am on it. If you're concerned, you can always give a little lead up to that link before you do the link, but be specific, don't be vague. So you can say, read more about this in the link to the document below, and then link the title of the document. So it's giving that clue in the text, but you're not having a link that says click here or read more. Because the problem with that is when folks are using assistive technology, they have options to like scroll through all the headings or scroll through all the links on the page, and because they can't see what is linked and what is not, but they can do that. And then if it's just reading click here, read more, etc., that's confusing. So it's not that you can't use the words click here, read more, but put that in context of the sentence, right? And then make the link the title of the destination of where it's going, because those screen reader users and things will have it read to them link and the name. And so they'll know that's a link. And then the viewer will see, oh, it's underlined, my cursor has changed, and maybe the sentence leading up is telling me there is going to be a link to the document. So you can use those things to introduce it. But for the most part, I think folks are understanding that, especially more and more people have smartphones now. They're used to, tapping on stuff and seeing on their phones what's a link. Of course, there's always going to be folks who it doesn't work for. That's the struggle with accessibility, is how do we make it accessible to as many as possible? There's always going to be someone that has a little bit of a different need. So hope that helps.
Excellent. And I'm just scrolling back through. There was also back to the Wave, that website checker. Would you demonstrate, like just show, like just put, I know you showed us using Chrome, but just show us, like if you were to drop the URL for this website
Okay,
there
yeah.
in that field, what do we get?
So if you go to the actual Wave website, which is this wave.webaim.org, so this instead of the Chrome extension will let you put any old web address in here. So I'll expose myself here and we'll do the EIT website. Then it just takes you there and it pulls up the same tool. So even if I didn't have the web browser, it would pull up the same tool. And you can just work your way through here with errors being the biggest deal and then alerts being less important, right? So alerts need a human eye to determine what to do with it. Errors are automatically, they're like, this is definitely a problem. So let's see, I've got a very low contrast error. I can click on it to find it and it should take you there. So it's taking me there, but I can't really see. Whenever that happens, I turn this styles off so that I can see. And in this case, the low contrast is something that's open main menu. So that's something that we have like hidden text. Sometimes this is like a holdover from an older way we did accessibility. So that's something that's not actually a visible contrast error. So sometimes you see some weird stuff like that. But if it's a contrast error that you can actually see, then that's something that we would need to update, and we'll have to look and see what that actually is coming from. But it's a little tricky sometimes to see what the error is. You do have to maybe have a little HTML knowledge if it's something like not obvious. So if I click on this, I can go to code and see, okay, this is this link that says open main menu. There's something hidden with this main menu feature, and it might actually be something here. So even though menu, that contrast is fine, right? It's white on black. There is clearly some kind of hidden text here, something that's not quite right. So I'll have to talk to our web developers to get that fixed. But there may be things that are straightforward that you can fix that are, I just need to change the font on this post or something. If you are a website user within the extension websites, we have a checker under this little bird. When you're logged in, it will show any issues with this little checker and you can click on it and find any issues without using the Wave tool. And Google Sites might also have a built-in one. Let's see if they have anything here. Let's say I have a fake website. Yeah. Maybe they don't. They're probably designed to be pretty accessible, but things like color contrast, it might not check for. Okay, I think you maybe have to have an add-on for that. So I would just use Wave for the Google Sites. Any other questions I missed? I'm scrolling back through.
I think we've hit a lot of them. And just a reminder to everybody, Bethany's going to share all the links and things with us, and we will be sending those out. We'll be posting them also on the EMG intranet. So you are going to have access to the recording, the links, the slides. You can spend a lot of time with this later because we do know it's a lot of information, a lot of great resources. There was also a question I saw, and then I lost somehow about concerns, like I think somebody was on the communications committee in their county, and what did they need to do. So I would just encourage you to talk to your agent. So if you are a Master Gardener volunteer who creates newsletters or any kind of content, online content for other Master Gardener volunteers and extension audiences, just talk to your agent about what you need to do and how you might need to make sure you're always adding alt text and all of the things that Bethany covered today. But your agent would be the first person to definitely talk to about that and discuss, what's required and what you need to do and think about.
And if they have questions, tell them to come talk to me and we'll sort it out. The other thing is, as you get confidence with this, share it with folks. If you see someone doing something, because we all can learn from each other. And as I encounter different things, I'm always researching, well, what should we do with this? And folks might have different opinions on some of it, but share the knowledge you gather with other people and try to be collaborative. Feel free to tell folks about the law if they haven't heard about it and things. not to scare them, but just so we can build some awareness about it.
Absolutely. And then to clarify, Bethany, so the agents can contact you. If any
Yes.
of our agents or extension professionals have questions, you will. And I have certainly benefited from your willingness to work directly and help make resources accessible. Well, we are at our time limit. We want to say a huge thank you to Bethany for a truly excellent workshop that just put so much important information very clearly organized. And even though it was a lot of stuff, but it was very easy to take in and understand. And you've provided us plenty of resources so that we could continue that learning. So we really appreciate your help and your time today. And you can see lots of that being echoed in the chat.
Thank you all for taking the time to learn. And yes, I know it's a fire hose, so just, take your time with it, dig into maybe one issue at a time and learn as you go. And we'll all still be learning, and it will keep changing too, day to day. So it'll be a lifelong learning sort of thing.
Absolutely. And again, we'll be sending the recording out and all the resources with thanks to Araya, who is in the background helping today, and will be coordinating getting all of those follow-up resources out to everybody. So thank you all, everybody, for everything you're doing to provide information to our folks in North Carolina about gardening and the Extension Master Gardener program. And we appreciate all your efforts to make that digitally accessible. I'm going to close things out. We will see you in a few weeks for plants, pests, and pathogens. That'll be our next webinar coming up.